In 1972, Kawasaki introduced the world a model called the H2 Mark IV. This two-stroke monster made the brand famous, being the most powerful and dangerous motorcycle in the world. People gave him the nickname WIDOWMAKER back then, due to his unstoppable power from a 750cc three-cylinder engine. The bike devoured a quarter-mile in 12 seconds, making it the fastest street-legal motorcycle for acceleration, who will subsequently transfer their name and status to the present-day flagship models of the company. The story of the Kawasaki H2, better known at the time as the Mark IV 750, begins in 1968 when its predecessor, the H1 Mark III, appeared. The thing is, during the period from 1955 to 1965, Kawasaki created a bunch of different motorcycles, but none of them stood out among the competition. But the company had a secret weapon that made it stand out. Kawasaki brought in engineers from their aviation division to develop completely new technologies for a motorcycle that could turn the entire two-wheeled world upside down. So then two groups of engineers got busy developing motorcycles. One group continued to produce traditional two-cylinder motorcycles, while the other focused on developing a completely new 500cc three-cylinder engine. The design turned out to be revolutionary. No Japanese company had made a motorcycle with 3 cylinders until now. This enabled Kawasaki to obtain a significant power increase. Initially, the trial with 3 cylinders was somewhat uncertain. The middle cylinder was constantly overheating and the engine was seizing up, but the group of developers solved this problem by increasing the cooling fins and the motorcycle went into production. So in the year 1968, the Mark III H1 was born, and it was the most powerful motorcycle in the world. His engine produced 60 horsepower with a displacement of 500 cubic centimeters. He was the best motorcycle of his time. Then, under the influence of the racing series Formula 750, which emerged in 1971, manufacturers began to increase the displacement in their motorcycles. Kawasaki introduced the Mark IV H2 motorcycle in 1972, a powerful rocket that caused a sensation in the industry. The volume of the 3-cylinder air-cooled two-stroke engine has increased to 750 cubic centimeters. The power has been raised to 74 horsepower, and the torque has been increased to 77 Newton meters. And all this power was distributed in a very narrow range of revolutions. For instance, if you ride an H2 without revving the tachometer above 5,000 revolutions per minute, the motorcycle won't raise any suspicions and will look like a regular city bike. But as soon as you raise the arrow precisely by 1,000 revolutions, this begins. The torque strikes the rear wheel like a ton of bricks and the engine immediately accelerates. Together with the short pendulum and the weight, which is primarily situated at the back, the front wheel unavoidably rises up during the initial 2 gears. In the hands of someone clumsy, this tricky object transformed into a genuine weapon. A weapon that was highly dangerous. In the hands of a skilled racer, Mark IV was the fastest production motorcycle globally, the street's king. But with someone less experienced on board, an accident could have happened. The motorcycle was often nicknamed the WIDOWMAKER. Luckily, the engine was friendly. He was practically talking to the pilot, it's just that no one had dealt with such engines before. This was facilitated by the 30mm Makuni carburetors, well tuned and allowing for very precise throttle control, which in turn affects the motorcycle's behavior. The 5-speed transmission came in handy in this situation, and it was skillfully tuned for both shifting up and shifting down. Coming out of this, it's not hard to understand why H2 was such a hit back in the day, and you just listen to this magical sound of a Japanese 2-stroke engine. The motorcycle was also equipped with a powerful front brake with a 295mm disc and a single piston caliper. There was a 203mm drum brake installed at the rear, and it should be noted that this motorcycle stopped just as well as it accelerated. Motorcycles had downsides: high fuel consumption, about 10 liters per 100 kilometers, strong vibrations, and lack of eco-friendliness. However, the main issue was the motorcycle frame. In the 70s, Japanese lacked expertise in making quality frames, unlike the Brits, for instance. And H2 was no exception. The tubular steel frame couldn't handle such high engine performance. The setup was scattered, struggling to maintain trajectory when turning, going over bumps, and even on a straight line when accelerating. In connection with this, the risk of wobbling increased, thereby making H2 even more desirable to call it a widower. Later, Kawasaki will even install 2 steering dampers, but they won't make much of a difference. However, this motorcycle was extremely popular, primarily of course due to its impressive power. Back in the day, journalists were describing the issue with the frame like this: a 12-second motorcycle for $1,400? So what if he's shaking a little? And you know what? That was the God's honest truth. That motorcycle was made for the drag strip, plain and simple. Some grease monkey from the world of motorcycles, a badass motorcycle, if you will. Even today, a motorcycle, when properly tuned, can show outstanding results. H2 had a big impact when it appeared. Everyone was eager to get it, because he could accelerate to a speed of just under 200 kilometers per hour. The competitors, particularly the twin brother H2, but with water cooling, the Suzuki GT 750 Lyman and the 4-cylinder 4-stroke Honda CB 750 were at least 10% weaker and heavier than the Kawasaki motorcycle. H2 proved that there was still something to show for a 2-stroke engine. And finally, let's discuss the success of the H2 and its racing variant, the H2R 750, in racing competitions. In 1972, Mike Still and Dave Burgess emerged as the champions of the Castrol 6-hour race at Daytona in 1973. Masahiro Wada showed an average speed of 164 km per h on the factory H2R. The first H2R arrived in Australia in February '73, and Rob Tomps was riding it. He won 12 out of 14 races that season. Even in 1976, Greg Hensford in Battersea on the H2R 750 was faster than the new KR 750 with liquid cooling. Following that, the Kawasaki Australia team received instructions to no longer take part in the races. The motorcycle had a production span of only a few years, from 1972 to 1975. Soon, 2-stroke engines went out of fashion due to new environmental regulations and an oil embargo, but Kawasaki H2 MK4 managed to turn the game around and make a name for itself among major global manufacturers. The trend of a powerful engine will be sustained in all forthcoming Kawasaki models, and after a span of 40 years, the company will replicate the revolution once more,